I guess I do want to jump back to one other thing with regarding theming. Um, whilst CSS isn't a formal theming API, like it's not okay. Here is like the set of things you can change. It's you can change anything. It's not really theming. It's just it's basically breaking the application to make it look a certain way. I think the issue that we see and the reason why a lot of people are sort of I guess so opposed to the changes that were made is we have treated it like theming for so long. Like it's the same thing with like KDE Global Themes, for example, is another good example where they've just sort of been we just sort of accepted that you install this thing and it just does everything. No one has really properly like the developers obviously knew like it from the start what GTK had was not theming, but to the users it looked like theming and it acted enough like theming where I guess now that there's this like shift away from that, and obviously GTK 4 by itself still has that there, but GNOME itself, they're moving away from that, and I guess have moved away from that. There is, I guess, it just doesn't make any sense to someone who, again, doesn't have that like internal knowledge of what's going on in the project. Even though the developers were clear, like they thought they were clear amongst themselves, it's just that message never properly got out to like the rest of the user base, I guess.
I think that to a certain extent, it's just difficult to explain a problem to someone that doesn't have it.
Right.
Like if I'm telling you, just like as a completely random example,
Mhm.
I like something that many people don't understand. For example, like socially, oh, I have trouble. I don't know, relating with people, speaking with people, right?
Mhm.
People that might have some kind of social anxiety or something like that.
Mhm.
That's difficult to relate with. That's difficult to understand because most people don't have that.
Mhm.
And it's as like inappropriate as an example that might be, I think that it speaks to the point. Like you don't have this issue, you don't understand it. It's reasonable like to assume that, right? And let me just make you an example here.
Okay.
So I make my application and I design a particular piece of this application to look like a boombox, okay, with CSS. I write my own classes, or I even like combine widgets that are not meant to do what I'm letting them do to make it look like a boombox.
Mhm.
Okay. Random guy comes around, makes a theme, and doesn't even know of the existence of my application. All of a sudden, the boombox looking thing doesn't work anymore. Or like, I don't know how themes even work with something like shortwave that has like a mini player looking thing that's really cool, but like very much not I don't know what, like the developer here like did something pretty cool, but very custom.
Mhm.
Do you theme around that? Do you make exceptions? Like you make special rules for every application out there? It just becomes like you cannot as a themer deal with it. Like and as a user, you cannot expect the theme developer or to deal with that. And just as well, you cannot expect the application developer to um, like expect random themes to do whatever with their application.
Mhm.
And I think that there is a middle ground there somewhere that you can reach, and that's like a theming API.
Right.
There is something sort of kind of looking like a theming API in GTK 4 and Libadwaita. And you might have seen it with something like the new GNOME text editor, or some, I think the black box terminal is a good example, where you basically change the syntax highlighting color, and it basically changes the entire user interface colors to like along with it.
Mhm.
I think that looks amazing. That can lead to some usability issues, but that's not really too big of an issue. And as far as I know, there has been work. There is probably still work going on to like finish up this API and like offer it publicly as
Mhm.
a recoloring API that like users can access. Right. I think that that's like a reasonable middle ground. And like depending on what you actually want to do with your theme, it might or might not be enough. And if it's not enough, then I'd say if you really want to see these like contribute to the discussion again, work with upstream, try to make the recoloring or the theming API a thing, to the extent that it makes sense, and to the extent that application developers can rely on the toolkit to not break their applications randomly with random stuff, right?
I do think recoloring is probably a better way to take it, because the issue we see with the CSS stuff especially is coloring's one thing. It's when you start messing with like spacing, like padding, margins, that's when applications really start to break. And the problem with the CSS is there isn't a guard there to stop you doing that. Like you can make a theme where it is just messing with the colors, and it's mostly fine. I don't want to say perfectly fine. It's mostly fine, because there obviously are issues you run into with like contrast, for example, where it might this colored elements being colored in a certain way might fit on the applications you test, but as you mentioned, there are applications that might be using those components in weird and maybe unintended ways, but when they're using Adwaita, it doesn't matter because they look the way Adwaita looks, and it's a hack and it shouldn't do that, but it looks like the developer intends. But the second you start messing with colors, it just all falls apart.
Yeah. And like you don't even have, like, I made a completely outrageous example, but you don't even have to look at like imaginary stuff to find good examples. Like I'm thinking about complex applications, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something like KDN Live, Ardor, or Z-Rhythm, right? Z-Rhythm in particular being written with GTK. Also, Darktable is a good example. Both Darktable and Z-Rhythm, for example, are written in GTK, and they effectively have their own theme, and they will not work without their own theme. So what is the angry themer gonna do about that? I don't know. The application just needs that CSS that overrides the entirety of even the GTK and the Libadwaita style sheet with something custom to function properly. For whatever reason, it's the developer's choice. And particularly for these kind of complex applications, I think they really make sense, because you're trying to cram so many things onto like a screen that might be as small as 7 inches, if not even smaller. If you like think about mobile, at some point you just need to like put in some ground rules, like put in some like pillars that are your truth, and that they are movable and that you can rely on.
No, I think that I think that's definitely fair. Like Darktale, I think, is a really good example. I didn't realize that was a GTK application, because
It is.
Like Caden Live, Caden Live is also another really good example. Like you can, as soon as you swap away from any of the theme, like any of like the basic themes, like breeze light, breeze dark, things just like it just doesn't work. And GIMP, obviously, they ship their own themes, and they have, like, when they move to GTK 3, they are building their own, like, theming system specifically for GIMP. I think something we can look to that's already done a recolor API, maybe it's more than GNOME would want, but Cosmic. Cosmic, they are gonna have theming, but it's not going to be full CSS. It's more, you can change specific accent colors, and you can't even change every color. It's going to infer certain colors based on what you choose, specifically with the goal of, I don't know the maths, but like there's some algorithm nonsense you can do to specify that the color that is generated has a certain level of contrast. I'm sure somebody knows how that all works, but
that's exactly the same in the partially implemented, already practically used GTK Libadwaita recoloring API, where you define like I don't know, the primary background color, and like the darker one is going to be calculated from that. It's just like a rule that says, okay, you take this color and you darken it, following a certain algorithm, right? Or you make it lighter to do something else, right? So that's exactly, I think, what GTK is also trying to do, and I think that that's a sensible choice, because you're giving customization options, and you're also like offering developers a good API to rely on.
Mhm.
And plus, let's remember that these customization options don't only apply to end users or distributions that necessarily want their own branding on stuff, but it also applies to what the developers can actually do. Many GTK for Libadwaita applications can take advantage of these recoloring stuff already, and I think that they look pretty. They definitely look the part.